Welcome back to Sustainability Mindshift, where we are exploring what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, including the skills and the capabilities and the mindsets which are critical for success. We are your hosts, Brad Pierce and Melker Larson. Great to have Melker back on the show. And we are very fortunate to have Jeroen Janss here with us today. Hello, Jeroen.
Hi, Brad. A pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming. Let me just tell the listeners a little bit about you, and then we'll jump right in. Jeroen is a facilitator, resilience coach, mindfulness trainer, and a keynote speaker, and he's based in Brussels, Belgium, although he's originally from the Netherlands. He is the founder and co-director of the Inner Green Deal, a not-for-profit initiative cultivating sustainable and compassionate leadership for a greener and fairer society. It's very exciting. We'll be talking about that today. Jeroen works with leaders in companies and international organizations such as the European Commission and the European Parliament to facilitate systemic change. So those are some very, big people, high power positions that he's working with on some complex issues like behavior change. He and his colleagues also develop training programs and tools that address the human dimensions of climate leadership and action that can be used by organizations and facilitators around the world to scale impact. He is passionate about his call to the community of facilitators, mindfulness teachers, and coaches to use their skills and understanding of how humans function to facilitate a shift in mindset and more compassionate way of living and working. So all of that aligns very nicely with what we're doing here on Sustainability Mindshift, and we're super happy to have you here, Jeroen.
Pleasure.
I wanted to start because you just got back from COP26, Conference of Parties 26, for those of you that don't know that, with the UN, big meeting, with a lot of expectations for the meeting by all of us on some serious commitments for change and to help us remain under the 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I think the overall mood after the 2 weeks that I've seen so far in the reports were that it was pretty much disappointment overall by most people. Although I did see that there was, I think the overall reactions were somewhat binary, other than the sort of overall mood of disappointment. So on the one side, I saw that people were using language of hope and optimism, that business leaders had actually started to talk a little bit more seriously about the climate change issues and other issues, and that there were some big deals that happened, including lots and lots and lots of money flowing toward net zero commitments, development of a global ESG standards board. There was commitments from the aviation and shipping industry. So there were some things that happened. But on the other side, and I actually was on this side of the fence, there was a great deal of anger and despair and even fear about the outcomes, because people were calling on leaders to put their words into action, and it didn't seem like there was enough action and commitment happening by this, what was called the business COP, actually, by some people. But I did see one more thing I wanted to note. I did see, which this is what gives me hope, is threaded throughout the conversations and the dialogue that was happening. It's the first time that I've seen that systems change was at the forefront of the conversations, not only from hearing it from the leaders, but also from the activists. And the first time ever I started to hear people talking about the need for shifting mindsets and behaviors, which is what we're talking about here. That's starting to enter the dialogue, which is great, not just from the consumers, like telling us consumers to purchase green products and drive our cars less and such, but actually from the organizational leadership, business, government, society level. So with that, I'd love to hear your take on it, Jeroen. You were there. Tell me about how you felt, what you observed.
Yeah, Brett, thank you. I would agree that it's a mixed picture. And I think what we need to, how we can look at an event like this, a conference, is to see it a little bit as a process. So to expect everything to happen at that event is just not very realistic, I think. But I think what we have been observing is that there has been quite a lot of progress still. Also, if you take a step back, 2 years ago, and it's not so long ago, right? 30% of the world had committed to net zero objectives, right? And now since last week, India joined as well, and we are now at 90%. So, that's progress. And, and then we can look at lots of other very specific pledges around methane and, deforestation. And yes, is it enough? No, it's not enough, but it's progress. And but I guess if we take a step back, Is it enough? Can we do better? Yes, we can do better, right? And then if we then now look at, the things that you and I have been talking about for a while about, mindset and how we can respond perhaps more effectively, I do see room for lots of improvement. I think that as a community of sustainability leaders, company leaders, politicians, but also voters, right, and activists, I think we are not exactly living the best version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I know, let that sink in a bit. I think we can do much better, and we know it somehow, but often we are just so busy, so distracted as well, so stressed, and sometimes a little bit cynical. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why is that, right? And I think we sometimes just get really caught up in doing, and so in being visible and being in social media, and in that process of being so busy, kind of got disconnected from our true selves, but also from others, and from nature, obviously, and treating nature as if it was a limitless resource. And I feel somehow this is related that too many of us lost the belief in our ability to change. And also by extension, lost a little bit the belief that we as humans can address this and can really handle this. And that's quite unhelpful and self-defeating. And also I'd like to add, it's unscientific. We adjust all the time, we change all the time. We are living creatures. And I think we can do much more. And what's interesting, maybe I'll pause for a moment, but if we look at COVID, for instance, it's a good metaphor and a good step change in a way. Because of COVID, it's not so much only that we're driving less and flying less and emitting less CO2. I think also what's been different because of COVID, that we're slowing down, right? And we start kind of to see the cracks in our existence and in the way we live. And we also start to see how connected we all are and how interconnected everything we do is, and how what you do impacts me and vice versa. So, and then, to look also at the bright side, we can also see that it is possible to address global challenges. It's possible we can come up with solutions. And, apart from big structural solutions, we've seen also countless examples of solidarity and collaboration. And as long as we connect and we don't drown ourselves in social media, of course. So, it's a mixed picture, but I also see lots of bright sides. Does that make sense?
This is really interesting. And you said something along the lines of that we're not living the best versions of ourselves. And I'm really interested to hear about, you're obviously working with improving ourselves as human with the Inner Green Deal. And I see more and more of this happening in the sustainability field and the bubbles that I am part of, people talking about the inner dimensions of the outer change needed. But how did you perceive the talk about these inner dimensions of the humanity of sustainability? How is the talk going at the conference like COP26?
Well, again, it's mixed. It was interesting. I'm collaborating with the UN, and I know that from Plum Village, there were a number of monks at COP26. And it's very interesting. We've been exchanging about this. They said the pace is just so different. When they came on stage, they walked very slowly, and they were asked with a slight sense of bewilderment what they observed. And, they said, people are walking so fast. They're not really there. They're not really present. And you think, that's an innocent remark or so, but actually it's pretty fundamental, because if we're negotiating and we're trying to connect and, trying to work towards a collective outcome, then we cannot not be present. You see what I mean? We cannot not be compassionate. We have to see how what we do matters and how we impact others. And, so I think all of these things are connected. And I think more and more people see this, also in the places that I work, such as the European Commission.
It's interesting. Yeah, I love the example you use of the monks, and I can feel it. The way that you talk, Jeroen, too, is has a nice pace to it. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of one of your excuse me, your sessions where you led us through a mindfulness exercise. Um, and it's interesting. It strikes me because my fear today is that we are running out of time, and I think it's shared by lots of people, that feeling up against you know tipping points, as they say. Science says there's tipping points, um, and so this paradox of needing to speed up and yet slow down is really interesting. Speak to us a little bit about that. I think in order to speed up, you need to slow down. Slow down first in order to speed up, or whichever direction. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, um, if we are stressed, you can see this. We often enter kind of this tunnel vision, right? We find it difficult to take on new challenges. We don't see enough options. All we are turning towards is trying to get through this and protect ourselves in a way. It's a very natural. It's a threat reaction, right? The threat response. It's driven by fear. We shut down, and that is just not showing the best side of ourselves. So I think we need to learn as leaders to be more resilient. And one of the things to do that is simply to notice, to slow down, and to notice what is going on. Where are you spending your time? How present are you when you are with people? What is it that you're doing that is essential and making a difference now? And when we talk to leaders and we do these programs, they're often quite surprised that we take quite a bit of time to literally go through a day with them. Like, how do you spend a day? Where is there space for you to think, and to reflect whether you're doing the right thing? And if you look at the schedules, it's literally back-to-back meetings. And they're surprised that they are not sufficiently switching off in the evening. And they're surprised that they're not sleeping well and recovering well. And, initially they think, oh yeah, that's a guy, leadership development, some softer things. I heard you meditate even, and then we say, yeah, that's fine. But why don't you wear an HRV device, where it can really measure the physical response as you go through the day, And they say, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Wear it for 5 days. And then we just see that people are in an activated, so sympathetic activation of their nervous system throughout the day, back-to-back meetings, normal. But then also in the evening, once the meetings have stopped. And then what's even more frightening is that these leaders that are taking crucial decisions, even when they get their 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep, and at COP it was less, I can tell you, they do not recover during their sleep sufficiently. So the quality of their thinking, the quality of their decisions is just, suboptimal, to say the least. See what I mean? So that's what we need to work on.
I think we expect ourselves to be machines these days, right? I think that's the expectation we set for ourselves and for others, and that's been clear from other examples I've seen of how society is moving in that direction of the mechanistic society, and stuff we've talked about on this show already with others. Right. It's hard to be human. It's hard to. I think in some people's mind it must feel a bit regressive, to be able to turn off the machine and actually experience being human again, or at least in your mind it's regressive. But of course, when you experience it, I think through being activated by mindfulness exercises like that you offer participants and leaders, it must feel quite refreshing once you actually experience it and feel human again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you, I mean, it's often, if you ask me, are people within, these big organizations skeptical of practices such as meditation? Yes, some of them are skeptical, but many not. But I have not met someone that doesn't acknowledge that changing mindsets means working with the mind. I think they can follow that logic. And then, there are a variety of reasons why people are actually very open to this. And first they see the need, right? That they need to engage people, they need to lead people, to bring people on this journey and all of that. And they understand that it's actually very hard to do that. It's easy to expect that from leaders. It's difficult for people to show up, make that speech, or say the right things in the right moment. Not easy. They know that. So, and then secondly, once they actually slow down a little bit and work with the mind, to give it more space and to practice very simple things, to be out in nature and to have proper dialogues, they can see that a whole different way of being is possible. That their quality of thinking increases drastically, that the quality of connections is much more strong and much more lived, and that they can actually really engage people. And people say, people came up to me and say, well, what happened? So people, I think, are open to it, and also fundamentally find it very liberating, to finally open up, often among peers in a safe way, and let their guard down, and just be for once a human being without, having to pretend that you got this, that you can handle this, or that you have something smart to say immediately. So I think that's it's beautiful to see that actually happening.
I love that you bring this up, the vulnerability aspects of this as well. It's something that I actually, straight after this call, will go into exploring a partnership where we have a workshop series we call It's All Personal, going into, like, especially when you're a leader or person who wants to work with these big challenges that encompass all humans. It's easily overwhelming, to say the least, and then to have your own practices, your own sovereignty, to be able to slow down and find the pace that is personally sustainable for you is, I believe, very important. And I also think it's something very interesting about seeing as well that you're not alone in these struggles, or seeing that you are part of a bigger whole. Because I think as soon as you think, I am going to solve the climate challenge, then you're out of your depth. But if you can think of yourself as part, and I love this, I just found this Fritjof Capra quote that reads, "The essential properties of an organism or a living system are properties of the whole, which none of the parts have. They arise from the relationships and interactions between the parts." And what this speaks to me is, and also connecting into what you have been working with, is this collective intelligence and seeing ourselves as part of bigger teams. And I know that these mindfulness projects and trainings that you work with are also doing this in form of teams. Can you talk a little bit about what happens in a team when each individual within the team are practicing these aspects?
Yeah, it's very beautiful. It's I think if you, again, from science, if you study why or what makes a team work well, we increasingly have a good idea of that. And it's not, necessarily putting together star people, that are going to create a great team outcome. And this is well known. It's actually much more about how you work and how you collaborate. And it's, as you say, Melker, it's these things like creating trust and being vulnerable, creating, in particularly, psychological safety in a group. Yeah. So, and you have to understand how that works, or some processes around it. But essentially, what you want to do with a group is make it safe to speak up. Make it safe for everyone to share. And you as a leader have to kind of initiate that, and you have to talk about your own challenges, and I think that helps. And there are lots of things, and it's not a one afternoon and it's all sorted. This is a process again that I think everyone can work on, but also is something that we shouldn't be afraid of to engage on, because it's something that is relatively well understood by social sciences right now.
So you started to talk about some of the components, I think, of what an inner Green Deal is. And, I know maybe the listeners have been curious about that from the beginning, and we're 20 minutes into it, but I'd love for you to just tell the listeners what exactly that means, the inner Green Deal. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so the inner Green Deal is on a basic level a response to the European Green Deal and other large-scale initiatives to transform our society. And when you look at these types of massive initiatives, it's clear that there is most of the focus goes towards the external factors like infrastructure, investing in technology, land uses, and all of that. And that's important and that needs to be done. But what we kind of observed that it's not enough, right? We're not seeing enough change. People are not changing their behavior, and that we need to therefore work on these inner dimensions and in particular the root causes of the climate crisis, which is how we look at nature, right? It's something that we can use and extract and just, something that we're superior to. And that's not going to help us. And it's also not going to help us if we continue to think of long-term targets and we miss out on the perspective, the bigger picture. So I think that was kind of our perception that something was missing, and that led us then to think, well, we as facilitators, as leadership developers, people, a bit of an understanding of how the mind works and how people work and what motivates people, perhaps we can play a role in that process. And then we just mixed the two together. We brought in the inner dimension, and and I immediately want to add that we're not the only ones. So it's interesting how these things now seem to pop up. We work with friends in Sweden developing the inner development goals to the sustainability goals. I know they're behind you. They have come up in your show before as well, and lots of other initiatives. I know you're working on this too, Brett and Melker. So I think it's very gratifying, and it's time that we address this inner part.
Yeah, I have this up in honor of COP26 for this cohort, and interestingly, yeah, the stuff that we're exploring here. I wanted to mention to listeners too that you have your own podcast, The Inner Green Deal, where it's beautiful to see more and more people having these conversations and exploring what's necessary and what's needed. What are the big questions that we all have that we're grappling with? And there's so many of them, right? So the more people that we can get involved, as part of our mission, Melker and mine in this, is to just raise the dialogue, be a part of the wave of consciousness and awareness to what's going on, because we don't have the answers. There's a lot of questions still, and the answers lie in people like you and others out there. So to have these conversations, these dialogues, it's great to partner with folks like you as well. And I've seen, and Melker has a couple of other podcasts. One reason why we started working together, so he could help me on the mechanical side of this as the executive producer. And I see, there's some cross-pollination of speakers too in some of his podcasts and ours and such. And so yeah, it's good to get different perspectives. How can people, access the Inner Green Deal through? Is it through your direct website or?
Yeah, so we are a not-for-profit initiative, but we are growing out of a training company, learning development company called Avaris. It's where we started working, and so we can find us there, and you can also look up, if you just type in Inner Green Deal podcast, it comes up. And so there is there are lots of resources out there that helps.
I also wanted to ask you about, because we are obviously a bit different in generations in here, and then on COP26 there's a massive predominance of a certain generation of leaders, and leaders of today are also perhaps forgotten that many of them are also parents to a younger generation. I think that's a really interesting aspect, because usually in sustainability, we talk about future generation and to take in consideration our children and our children's children. And I know you've been touching a little bit upon this of working with board members. Like, how is the aspect of parenthood affecting leaders of today, do you think?
I do think it really helps. As leaders, if we're just running around disconnected somehow from our true lives, we don't see our children maybe enough. The work gets done in the household. We're not aware of that. We don't even aware of cleaning products we use. I think children are fascinating creatures. And I have 3 of them that at home that really ground us, right? They ask brutal questions. They are completely unimpressed with the work we're doing and demand attention and honesty. And I think that's beautiful about them. And when you talk to leaders and you talk to anyone, a parent, ask them about their children is a wonderful way to connect with the life that comes after, not just the busy now, but also what is to come, and think about the next generation. And frankly, also beyond our children, the children on the other side of the world, but also the children's and the 7th generation, as Indigenous leaders like to think. So we are excited to explore initiative to actually film and interview children of leaders, and in private viewings give this back to them as a small gift, not to share this on social media, just for them, almost say, I'm going to show you this once and then we will destruct it, we'll see about that. But I think it's a very interesting phenomenon that somehow, because the way we're wired, we somehow seem to have a little bit more empathy for those that are closest to us. And that's an interesting fact of life. I think it's something we all can work on. But if this is something that helps leaders ground themselves, see reality, and think about the future, then we are keen to facilitate that.
I think you're onto something. I've heard some powerful stories from people, including I was just listening to a podcast with John Doerr, who talked about his daughter. I think it was his daughter. I don't think it was a grandchild, but who was sitting around the table at dinner, and she looked him square in the eyes and said, "Dad, this is your problem. It's our future problem, but it's your problem. You have the power to make decisions right now. What are you going to do about it?" Yeah. And that really struck a chord with him, and that's actually what moved him away from some of the sort of more technical sides of Silicon Valley into looking at climate change and really exploring it deeply and research and spending a lot of money there and investing in companies. Similarly, I think I heard a story from maybe even it was Ray Anderson who started Interface, or someone else who was touched by their child. So I think you're onto something. That's a powerful way to pull at the heartstrings of some of these leaders. I love it. I can't wait to see this unfold.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great. We're at the half hour. I hate that these things are so short, but that's what we've decided to do for our listeners. Keep it within a half hour. And you've been great, a wonderful guest, very inspirational. We look forward to seeing how the Inner Green Deal continues to develop, and looking for ways that we can partner together to get the word out. And thank you for being you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Melker. It's an honor and a real privilege to be here today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.